At 06:15 on September 20th, 1944, Major Charles Carpenter crouched beside his Piper L4 Grasshopper on a muddy airstrip near Aricourt, France, watching fog roll across fields where German Panther tanks were advancing toward trapped American positions. 32 years old, 47 combat sorties, 6 bazookas bolted to his wings. The German 5th Panzer Army had launched 262 tanks and assault guns against Combat Command A of the 4th Armored Division 2 days earlier. Carpenter was a high school history teacher from Moline, Illinois before the war. He taught teenagers about battles. Now he flew a fabric-covered observation plane with a 65-horsepower engine over battles where men burned inside steel coffins. The L4 Grasshopper weighed 765 pounds empty. Maximum payload was 232 pounds, assuming a pilot and no radio. Carpenter had mounted 6 M9 bazooka launchers on the wing struts. Each launcher weighed 15 pounds. The M6A3 heat rockets added another 3 pounds each, 18 total rockets. The mathematics said his plane was overloaded by nearly 90 pounds. Every other L4 pilot in France flew reconnaissance missions, spot enemy positions, call coordinates to artillery, stay high, stay safe. The Germans barely bothered shooting at Cubs. Too small, too harmless. Carpenter had spent 3 months watching American tank crews die while he circled overhead with binoculars and a radio. The 4th Armored Division lost 48 Shermans in the first 2 days at Aricourt. German Panthers could penetrate Sherman armor at 1,200 yards. American 75mm guns needed 300 yards for a kill shot. Most Sherman crews never got close enough to fire. September 18th, the fog came before dawn, and German tanks used it for cover. Carpenter took off at first light, but the ground disappeared beneath white nothing. He circled blind for 90 minutes. By the time the fog lifted, 11 American Shermans were burning in the fields around Luneville. He watched crews bail out. Some made it. Most did not. One Sherman took a hit to the ammunition storage. The explosion threw the turret 40 feet. Carpenter saw the loader stumble out with his uniform on fire. The man took 5 steps and collapsed. Carpenter could do nothing except mark the position and call it in. September 19th. The 113th Panzer Brigade pushed through American outposts near Aricourt. 43 Panthers destroyed or damaged by midnight. American tankers fought from concealed positions using terrain and surprise. It worked. Barely. But Combat Command A was spread thin across 12 miles of rolling farmland, and the Germans kept coming. 2 weeks earlier, Carpenter heard about Lieutenant Harley Merrick and Lieutenant Roy Carson. They mounted bazookas on their L4s and destroyed 2 German trucks. Trucks. Carpenter wanted tanks. He found an ordnance tech and a crew chief willing to help. They bolted 3 M9 launchers to each wing strut just outboard of the jury struts, angled upward 20 degrees. Electronic triggers wired to switches in the cockpit, individual fire or full salvo. The crew chief named the plane Rosie the Rocketer. Other pilots called it Suicide. If you want to see whether Carpenter's bazooka-armed Grasshopper could actually destroy German tanks, please hit that like button. It helps us share more forgotten stories from World War II. Subscribe if you haven't already. Back to Carpenter. The fabric on the L4's wings was treated cotton. The bazooka rockets produced 1,200 degrees of exhaust flame. Nobody knew if the wings would catch fire. Nobody knew if the overloaded Grasshopper could pull out of a dive steep enough to aim the angled launchers. Nobody had tested it in combat. September 20th. Morning fog. German tanks attacking through the mist. Carpenter climbed into the cockpit alone. No observer, no radio operator. Just him and 18 rockets. The engine coughed twice and caught. He released the brakes and the overloaded Grasshopper lurched forward. By noon, he would either be dead or he would change how Cubs fought. The Grasshopper climbed through fog at 400 feet per minute. Maximum climb rate was 600, but the extra weight cost performance. Carpenter leveled off at 1,500 feet. White nothing below, white nothing ahead. He throttled back to cruising speed, 75 miles per hour. The engine settled into a steady drone. Fuel capacity was 12 gallons. Endurance, roughly 3 hours. He had left at 0642. By 0930, The fog still had not lifted. The L-4 handled differently with the bazookas mounted. The launchers created drag. The rockets added weight to the wings. Carpenter tested shallow banks. The Grasshopper responded sluggishly. He pushed the nose down 5 degrees. The fabric wings creaked. The bazooka tubes caught wind and pulled. This was not the gentle cub he had flown on artillery spotting missions. This was something heavier, something angrier. At 09:53, the fog began breaking apart in patches. Carpenter saw ground through gaps, fields, trees, the Rhine-Marne Canal reflecting gray sky. He dropped to 1,000 feet and began a systematic search pattern, north to south, east to west, looking for German armor. The 4th Armored Division's Combat Command A held positions around Aricourt and the surrounding villages, Juvilliers to the north, Moncourt to the south, Bézange-la-Petite to the east. German forces had attacked from multiple directions, trying to encircle American units. Carpenter needed to find where they were massing for the next push. 11:07. The fog cleared enough to see the roads. Carpenter spotted movement 3 miles northeast of Aricourt. He descended to 800 feet. Panther tanks. He counted 6, maybe 7. Difficult to tell with some partially hidden in tree lines. Armored cars moving with them. Infantry following on foot. The formation was advancing southwest toward American positions. Carpenter checked his fuel. Enough for 1 attack run and 90 minutes reserved to return to base. The M9 bazooka had an effective range of 300 yards. The rockets traveled at 265 feet per second. Gravity and wind affected trajectory beyond 100 meters. Carpenter needed to get close. Very close. The bazookas were angled upward 20 degrees from horizontal. To aim them at a target on the ground, Carpenter had to put the Grasshopper into a shallow dive, 30 degrees nose down, maybe 35. Aim with the entire aircraft. Fire at 100 meters. Pull up before German infantry opened fire with small arms. He climbed to 1,200 feet and positioned himself south of the German column. Sun behind him. The Panthers were moving slowly through terrain still partially obscured by ground fog. Carpenter pushed the throttle forward and nosed over. The Grasshopper accelerated in the dive. 80 miles per hour. 90. The fabric wings vibrated. The bazooka tubes screamed in the wind. He could see individual Panthers now. Turrets traversing. Commanders standing in hatches. He armed the first launcher. Right wing outboard position. His thumb rested on the firing switch. 150 meters. The lead Panther grew larger in his windscreen. 120 meters. He could see the German cross markings on the turret. 100 meters. Carpenter pressed the switch. The M6A3 rocket ignited with a crack that shook the entire airframe. 1,200 degrees of exhaust flame shot backward, missing the fabric wing by inches. The rocket streaked toward the Panther, trailing white smoke. Carpenter did not wait to see impact. He hauled back on the stick, and the Grasshopper clawed for altitude. The overloaded plane responded slowly. Too slowly. German infantry below opened fire. Small arms, machine pistols, rifle rounds snapped past the cockpit. One punched through the fabric on the left wing. Another hit the tail section. Carpenter kept climbing. 200 feet? 300. The firing stopped. He leveled off at 800 feet and looked back. The Panther had stopped moving. Smoke rose from the engine deck. Not destroyed. Immobilized. The rocket had hit the thinner armor on top or damaged the engine. The rest of the German column had scattered into defensive positions. Infantry were pointing at the sky. At him. At the cub with bazookas that just attacked a Panther tank. Carpenter had 17 rockets remaining, and the Germans were no longer ignoring observation planes. Carpenter turned the Grasshopper northwest toward the American airstrip at Luneville. Fuel gauge showed 9 gallons remaining, enough for reloading and 1 more sortie, maybe 2 if he stayed over friendly territory. The bullet holes in the wing and tail were small. The fabric held. The control surfaces responded normally. He descended to 100 feet and followed the terrain back to base using trees and ridges for cover. German infantry now knew Cubs could bite. He touched down at 11:58. Ground crew ran to the plane before the propeller stopped turning. They saw the bullet holes first. Then they saw the empty bazooka tube. One crew chief climbed onto the wing and examined where the rocket had fired. The fabric around the launcher was scorched black, but intact. No burn-through. The metal tube had channeled most of the exhaust away from the wing surface. The design worked. Barely. Reloading took 14 minutes. 6 M6A3 rockets slid into the launch tubes. Each rocket weighed 3.38 pounds. Total weight, 19.4 inches long. Blunted nose designed to prevent deflection at low impact angles. Shaped charge warhead could penetrate 3.5 to 4 inches of armor plate. The crew chief asked what Carpenter hit. One Panther immobilized. The crew chief asked how close he got. 100 meters. The crew chief said that was insane. Carpenter said it was effective. 12:19. Carpenter took off again. Fuel load 11.7 gallons. Maximum capacity was 12, but ground crew could not completely fill tanks during rapid turnaround. 18 rockets total across both sorties, 6 expended, 12 remaining. He climbed to 1,200 feet and turned east toward Arracourt. The fog had mostly cleared. Visibility extended to 5 miles. German positions were now exposed to American air observation. Carpenter scanned for armor concentrations. 12:41. He spotted another formation. 8 Panther tanks moving south along a tree line east of Bazoges-la-Petite, infantry following in half-tracks. This was a larger force than the first, probably elements of the 111th Panzer Brigade attempting to flank American positions. Carpenter radioed coordinates to Combat Command A artillery, received acknowledgement. But artillery took time. Shells had to be ranged, adjusted, walked onto target. The Panthers would be gone before rounds landed. Carpenter decided to attack immediately. He climbed to 1,500 feet and positioned for a diving attack from the southwest. Sun still behind him. The Panthers were spread across 400 yards of road. Carpenter selected the lead tank. Same technique as before. Nose down 35 degrees. Accelerate in the dive. 100 meters range. Fire. The first rocket launched clean. He pulled up hard and banked left. Machine gun fire followed him, heavier than before. The Germans had learned. They were ready. Tracers arced past the cockpit. Something hit the engine cowling with a metallic clang. The Continental engine coughed once but kept running. Carpenter circled wide at 1,000 feet and looked back. The lead Panther had stopped. Smoke from the engine compartment. Immobilized, not destroyed. The rest of the formation scattered into dispersed positions. Infantry dismounted from half-tracks. Some were setting up what looked like anti-aircraft positions. Carpenter had 11 rockets left, but the Germans were now actively hunting him. He lined up for a second pass, dove toward a Panther that had pulled off the road into a field, armed the launcher. 120 meters. German infantry opened fire while he was still descending. The grasshopper shuddered. Fabric ripped somewhere behind him. He fired anyway. The rocket streaked down. Carpenter pulled up without confirming impact. More tracers. Something punched through the lower fuselage. He felt the impact through the rudder pedals. 800 feet. He leveled off and checked instruments. Oil pressure, normal. Engine temperature, normal. Controls responsive, except the rudder felt mushy. He looked back. The second Panther was burning, not immobilized, destroyed. Flames poured from the turret hatches, crew bailing out. But Carpenter's tail section had multiple tears in the fabric. One elevator cable looked frayed. The rudder was responding, but with noticeable delay. 2 Panthers stopped, 10 rockets remaining. But his aircraft was damaged, and the Germans were setting up dedicated anti-aircraft positions around their remaining armor. Carpenter turned west toward Luneville. The damaged rudder made coordinated turns difficult. He had to overcompensate with aileron inputs. The Grasshopper wanted to slip sideways in banks. Fuel gauge showed 7.2 gallons, enough to reach base with minimal reserve. The engine still ran smoothly, but the oil temperature had climbed 5 degrees above normal. Not critical yet. Possibly a small leak from the round that hit the cowling. 13:21. Radio transmission from Combat Command A. German armor had bypassed forward positions and trapped a 4th Armored Division water point support crew 3 miles east of Arracourt. Approximately 20 men. No heavy weapons. Panther tanks closing on their position. Artillery could not reach them without hitting American forces. Air support was engaged elsewhere. The Waterpoint crew was requesting immediate assistance. Any assistance. Carpenter checked his position. 4 miles from the trapped Americans. 6 miles from his airstrip. 10 rockets remaining on a damaged aircraft that was barely holding together. The smart decision was obvious. Return to base. Land. Let mechanics assess the damage. Reload. Return in a working aircraft. But the transmission said Panther tanks were closing on the position. 20 American soldiers had minutes, maybe less. He turned the Grasshopper east and pushed the throttle forward. The engine responded. Oil temperature climbed another 3 degrees. Carpenter descended to 500 feet and followed terrain features toward the coordinates Combat Command A had transmitted. 1334. He spotted the Waterpoint position. 5 trucks parked in a small clearing surrounded by trees. American soldiers, visible, taking cover behind vehicles. Then he saw the Panthers, 4 of them, advancing from the northeast, maybe 800 yards from the American position. Infantry moving with the tanks. The Germans had learned from the previous attacks. When Carpenter approached, all 4 Panthers stopped moving. Infantry scattered into defensive positions. Machine guns traversed skyward. They were waiting for him. Ready for him. This would not be a surprise attack against an unsuspecting column. This would be a gun battle where Carpenter was flying an unarmed observation plane made of fabric and hope. He climbed to 1,800 feet, outside effective small arms range. Barely. The Panthers resumed advancing toward the trapped Waterpoint crew. Carpenter had to choose: attack and probably get shot down, or circle uselessly while 20 Americans died. His right hand moved to the firing switches. He armed all remaining launchers, 10 rockets. He would fire everything in successive passes and pray the Grasshopper held together. First dive. 38 degrees nose down. The damaged rudder made the descent unstable. He had to fight the controls. 95 miles per hour. 100. The airframe vibrated badly. Something in the tail section was loose and rattling. Lead Panther filled his windscreen. German infantry opened fire at 200 meters, far earlier than before. They had estimated his attack pattern. Tracers converged on his flight path. 150 meters. Carpenter fired 2 rockets, both launchers. The Grasshopper bucked from the recoil. He pulled up. Hard. The elevator control cable frayed during the previous attack chose that moment to separate partially. The stick went mushy. Response delayed. Carpenter pulled harder. The nose came up slowly. Too slowly. He was still below 400 feet when he passed over the German position. Rifle fire from every direction. The Grasshopper shuddered. Multiple impacts. Fabric tearing. Metal pinging. He held the climb. 500 feet. 600. Both rockets hit near the lead Panther. Near. Not on. The explosions threw dirt and debris, but the tank kept moving. Damage, perhaps. Not stopped. Carpenter leveled off at 900 feet. The engine was running rough now. The oil temperature gauge showed red. Definitely a leak. Maybe worse. His fuel gauge read 5.8 gallons. Not enough to return to base if he stayed in the area much longer. The tail section felt like it might separate entirely. 8 rockets remaining. 3 Panthers still advancing on 20 trapped Americans. And the Germans below were no longer just shooting at him. They were coordinating. They were learning his attack pattern. They were waiting for him to dive again so they could kill him. Carpenter had 30 seconds to solve the problem. The Germans expected him to dive from altitude. They positioned their guns to cover that approach. The Panthers kept moving toward the American Waterpoint crew. 700 yards now. American soldiers were firing rifles at armored vehicles. Useless. Desperate. Carpenter needed a different angle, a different pattern, something the Germans would not anticipate. He dropped to 200 feet. Terrain following altitude. Below effective range of organized anti-aircraft fire. The Germans had positioned their guns skyward, expecting high dives. Carpenter approached from the west, using a tree line for concealment. 80 miles per hour. The damaged elevator made level flight difficult. The engine temperature gauge stayed deep in the red zone, oil pressure dropping. He had minutes before the Continental engine seized. 600 yards from the Panthers. Carpenter popped up to 300 feet and immediately nosed over into a steep dive. Attack angle 40 degrees. steeper than before. The angled bazookas meant steeper dives aimed more directly at targets. The lead Panther was 200 yards from the trapped Americans. Carpenter armed 2 launchers, left wing outboard and center positions. 130 meters range. German infantry spotted him. They swung their weapons, but Carpenter was already firing. Both rockets launched simultaneously. The recoil nearly stalled the Grasshopper. He shoved the throttle to the stop and pulled back hard on the damaged elevator. The nose came up. Barely. He cleared the Panther by 70 feet. Both rockets hit. One struck the turret ring. The other penetrated the thinner top armor of the engine compartment. The Panther stopped. Flames erupted from the engine deck. Crew hatches flew open. German tankers bailed out with their uniforms smoking. Destroyed. Confirmed destroyed. Not immobilized. Burning. Carpenter did not climb. He stayed at 300 feet and immediately turned for the second Panther. The Germans were confused. Their anti-aircraft positions were aimed at empty sky above, while Carpenter attacked from below their firing lanes. He armed 2 more launchers, right wing outboard and center. The second Panther was turning its turret toward the American water point position, range 110 meters. Carpenter fired both rockets and banked hard right. Machine gun fire from German infantry ripped through the left wing. The fabric separated completely from the forward lift strut. The wing held together. Barely. But it held. 1 rocket missed. The second hit the Panther's turret side armor at a 30-degree angle. Penetration. The shaped charge detonated inside. Secondary explosion followed. Ammunition storage cooking off. The turret lifted 6 inches and settled crooked. Crew emergency exit through the bottom hatch. The Panther burned. 2 destroyed. 2 advancing. The remaining Panthers were 500 yards from the American position. Infantry with them had gone to ground. Some were retreating. They had watched 2 Panthers die in 90 seconds. Carpenter armed 2 more rockets. 6 remaining total. The engine was shaking badly now. Metal-on-metal grinding sounds from the cowling. Temperature gauge pegged maximum. He had 1 more attack run before the engine failed completely. Third dive. The rear Panther. Smaller target. Partially obscured by the lead tank. Range 120 meters. Carpenter fired 1 rocket. Saved the others. The rocket hit low. Track assembly. The Panther slewed left and stopped moving. Immobilized, but not destroyed. The crew kept the engine running. Turret still traversing. The last Panther was 400 yards from 20 American soldiers. Carpenter had 5 rockets and an engine that was seconds from catastrophic failure. Oil smoke poured from the cowling. The propeller was vibrating so badly he could barely see through it. The trapped water point crew was firing everything they had at the advancing Panther. Small arms, useless against armor. Carpenter turned the dying Grasshopper toward the last German tank. The last Panther was 350 yards from the American position, close enough that Carpenter could see individual soldiers behind the water point trucks. They had stopped firing, conserving ammunition, preparing for the tank to overrun them. The Panther's turret traversed toward the largest truck, preparing to fire. High explosive round would kill everyone in the blast radius. Carpenter's engine seized for 2 seconds. The propeller stopped. Complete silence except for wind through the torn fabric wings. Then the engine caught again. Grinding, clattering. Dying, but not dead. Not yet. He armed 3 rockets, everything remaining on the right wing. He would fire all 3 simultaneously. Maximum firepower. 1 pass, no second chances. The Grasshopper descended to 150 feet, lowest attack altitude yet. The Panther was stationary now, hull down behind a slight rise, only the turret visible to the Americans. But Carpenter was coming from the side, from the east. He could see the full hull profile. Thinner side armor compared to frontal plate. Range 140 meters. The damaged elevator barely responded. Carpenter used throttle and aileron to aim the entire shaking aircraft. 120 meters. The Panther's commander stood in the turret hatch scanning for threats. He saw the Grasshopper. Too late. Carpenter fired all 3 rockets. The simultaneous launch nearly tore the right wing off. The Grasshopper rolled violently left from the unbalanced recoil. Carpenter fought the controls. The wing held. The rockets converged on the Panther. All three hit within 2 seconds. First rocket struck the turret side. Penetration. Second rocket hit the upper hull. Penetration. Third rocket hit the track assembly and detonated externally. The combined effect was catastrophic. The Panther's ammunition storage exploded. The entire vehicle lifted off the ground from internal pressure. Turrets separated completely. The hull split open. Secondary explosions continued for 15 seconds. Nobody escaped. 4 Panthers, 2 destroyed, 2 immobilized, 20 American soldiers alive. The Waterpoint crew was already moving, loading trucks, preparing to evacuate while German infantry was still scattered and disorganized. Carpenter had saved them. But his aircraft was 3 miles from base with an engine that had approximately 60 seconds of life remaining. He turned west. Maximum power. The engine responded with sounds no Continental 0170-3 should ever make. Metal fragments rattled inside the cowling. Oil covered the windscreen. Temperature gauge had stopped reading entirely. Probably broken. Definitely overheated. The propeller continued turning through momentum and desperation. 2 miles from Luneville. The engine seized again. This time, it did not restart. Complete silence. No engine, just wind. The Grasshopper became a glider. A very poor glider with torn fabric and a loaded weight distribution never designed for unpowered flight. Carpenter trimmed for best glide speed, 65 miles per hour. Altitude, 800 feet. Descent rate approximately 400 feet per minute. He had 2 minutes of gliding time, maybe less with the damaged aerodynamics. 1 mile from the airstrip. Altitude, 400 feet. Carpenter could see the runway. Ground crew had spotted him. They could see the oil smoke, the torn wings. They were clearing the runway. Fire equipment moving into position. He was too low. The glide angle would not reach the runway. He needed another 200 feet of altitude. He did not have 200 feet. There was a field northeast of the runway. Plowed earth, soft ground, bad for landing gear but better than trees. Carpenter aimed for the field. Altitude, 150 feet. The Grasshopper descended steadily. No engine power to arrest the sink rate. No control authority at low speed with damaged surfaces. 100 feet. The field expanded below him. 50 feet. He pulled back gently on the stick, flared the landing. The tail wheel touched first, then the main gear. The soft earth grabbed the wheels. The Grasshopper nosed over. The propeller dug into mud. The aircraft flipped forward and came to rest, inverted. Carpenter hung upside down in his harness. Fuel was leaking from the ruptured tank. The engine was hot enough to ignite gasoline vapor. He had seconds to escape before Rosie the Rocketer burned. Carpenter released his harness. He dropped onto the inverted cockpit roof. Fuel dripped onto his flight suit. The smell of high-octane gasoline filled the enclosed space. He kicked at the side door. Jammed. The impact had bent the frame. He braced his back against the seat and kicked harder. The door broke free. Carpenter crawled out through the opening, rolled clear, got to his feet. Ran 20 yards before his legs gave out. Ground crew reached him 40 seconds later. Fire equipment sprayed foam on Rosie the Rocketer. The fuel leak stopped burning before ignition occurred. Medical personnel checked Carpenter for injuries. Minor cuts. Bruises across his chest from the harness. No broken bones. No burns. 47 combat sorties in Bazooka Cubs. Never wounded. The ground crew called him the Lucky Major. Carpenter called it mathematics. Stay low, attack fast, never give them a clear shot. September 20th, 1944. 3 sorties, 18 rockets expended, 4 Panther tanks stopped, 2 destroyed, 2 immobilized, 20 American soldiers extracted alive, 1 L-4H Grasshopper destroyed, engine seized from sustained oil loss and thermal damage, wings torn beyond repair, fuselage structurally compromised, total write-off. But the concept worked. Bazookas mounted on observation aircraft could kill tanks. The 4th Armored Division's Combat Command A held Aracourt against the German 5th Panzer Army counteroffensive. Between September 18th and September 29th, German forces committed 262 tanks and assault guns to recapturing Luneville and eliminating the American bridgehead. They lost 200, destroyed or damaged. American forces lost 48 tanks. The Battle of Aracourt became the largest tank engagement on the Western Front until the Battle of the Bulge 3 months later. Carpenter's bazooka attacks on September 20th disrupted German coordination during critical hours when Combat Command A was most vulnerable. Carpenter received another L4H 3 days later. Serial number 43-30426. Same modifications. 6 M9 bazookas. Same crew chief. Same name painted on the cowling. Rosie the Rocketer. Between September and December 1944, Carpenter flew 63 more bazooka attack missions. Official records credited him with 6 tanks destroyed total, 2 Tiger tanks, 4 Panthers or Panzer IVs, several armored cars, numerous soft-skinned vehicles. Witness accounts from ground forces suggested the actual number was higher, possibly 14 tanks. Difficult to confirm when Carpenter attacked targets miles from American lines and could not land to verify kills. Other L4 pilots attempted similar modifications. Most abandoned the concept after one mission. Diving a fabric-covered observation plane into concentrated anti-aircraft fire was statistically unsurvivable. Lieutenant Harley Merrick and Lieutenant Roy Carson, the original bazooka innovators, returned to standard reconnaissance duties after destroying their 2 trucks. They concluded the risk outweighed the tactical benefit. Carpenter disagreed. He attacked German armor 63 more times after September 20th. The Stars and Stripes newspaper interviewed him in October. Asked why he continued, Carpenter said the war needed to be fought 60 minutes an hour and 24 hours a day. Attack, attack, attack again. German forces changed their doctrine because of him. Before September, they ignored Cubs. Observation planes were not threats. After Carpenter, standing orders required all ground units to engage any L4 on site. Infantry carried dedicated anti-aircraft weapons when operating with armor. Panther and Tiger commanders posted spotters specifically to watch for Cubs with tubes on their wings. The Germans called him Der Verrückte Major, the Mad Major. Carpenter accepted the name. Said madness was required when fighting tanks that could kill Shermans at 1,200 yards. The 4th Armored Division advanced east through France. Carpenter flew with them. Personal pilot for General John S. Wood in addition to his attack missions. By December, 3rd Army had pushed to the German border. Carpenter had accumulated 110 combat sorties, still never wounded, despite being shot at during every bazooka attack. Then 1945 arrived, and Carpenter became ill. Doctors diagnosed Hodgkin's disease in early 1945. Lymphoma. Terminal. Army physicians gave Carpenter 2 years maximum survival time. He was 32 years old. He had survived 110 combat sorties flying an unarmed observation plane into anti-aircraft fire. Never wounded. Never shot down by enemy action. Cancer would accomplish what German Panther tanks could not. The Army promoted Carpenter to lieutenant colonel and awarded him the Silver Star for valor, Bronze Star with Oak Leaf Cluster, Air Medal with Oak Leaf Cluster. Officially credited with 6 tanks destroyed, 17 armored vehicles disabled or destroyed, dozens of soft-skinned targets. The citations mentioned extraordinary heroism and complete disregard for personal safety. They did not mention that Carpenter was a high school history teacher who believed wars should be fought aggressively or not at all. June 1946. Honorable discharge. Carpenter returned to Urbana, Illinois, returned to teaching. Back to classrooms and teenagers and lessons about battles he had lived through. His wife Elda had waited. His daughter Carol was 7 years old. Carpenter had 2 years, according to military doctors. He intended to spend them teaching. 1948 arrived. Carpenter was still alive, still teaching. 1950, still alive. 1955, still alive. The 2-year prognosis became 5 years, then 10, then 15. Medical science in the 1940s did not fully understand Hodgkin's disease progression. Some patients exceeded predicted survival times. Carpenter became one of them. He taught history at Urbana High School for 20 years after doctors said he would be dead. March 22, 1966. Charles Carpenter died at age 53, 21 years after diagnosis, 19 years past the predicted 2-year survival. He outlasted the cancer almost as stubbornly as he had attacked German tanks. Buried at Edgington Cemetery in Illinois. The grave marker listed his rank, Lieutenant Colonel. It did not mention Bazooka Charlie or Rosie the Rocketer or the Mad Major, just the name and dates in service. The L4H Grasshopper Carpenter flew, serial number 4330426, disappeared after the war. Most assumed it was scrapped or lost. In 2017, aviation historians identified the aircraft in the collection of the Austrian Aviation Museum at Graz Airport. It had been flying in a civilian club in Vienna for decades. Nobody knew its history. Nobody knew it was Rosie the Rocketer. The Collings Foundation purchased the aircraft in 2018 and began restoration. The same Grasshopper that destroyed Panther tanks in September 1944 would fly again. Carpenter's innovation did not survive the war. The L-4 with Bazookas was too vulnerable for sustained combat operations. Helicopters eventually replaced observation planes. Dedicated ground attack aircraft replaced improvised weapons systems. But for 4 months in 1944, when American tank crews were dying against superior German armor, a history teacher from Illinois flew a 65-horsepower observation plane into anti-aircraft fire because somebody had to do something. If this story moved you the way it moved us, do me a favor. Hit that like button. Every single like tells YouTube to show this story to more people. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We're rescuing forgotten stories from dusty archives every single day. Stories about pilots who saved lives with bazookas and courage. Real people, real heroism. Drop a comment right now and tell us where you're watching from. Are you watching from the United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia? Our community stretches across the entire world. You're not just a viewer. You're part of keeping these memories alive. Tell us your location. Tell us if someone in your family served. Just let us know you're here. Thank you for watching. And thank you for making sure Charles Carpenter doesn't disappear into silence. These men deserve to be remembered, and you're helping make that happen.